Hey, what's up guys, it's alternatetechguy. This video is an introduction to what is Linux and Linux kernel. You may heard from your family, friends, or people that are in IT industry that they are using Linux. So what is it? Linux is an operating system based on Linux kernel, which was first released in 1991 by Linus Torvalds. Now you may wonder, what is kernel? Kernel is a computer program at the core of the OS. In a simple word, it manages all the resources in your computer, and is also an interface between hardware and user processes. There are three types of kernel, and most of the kernels falls into one of these three types. First is monolithic, second is microkernel, and third is hybrid. Linux is a monolithic kernel, which means all the operations of hardware and driver handled by kernel, while OS X and Windows use hybrid type of kernels. If you take a look at this diagram, I broke down a Linux machine into three layers to show you what kernel actually does. First layer is hardware, which is what your physical machine has built above, like CPU, RAM, graphics, and other components. And the top layer is user processes. User processes means all the running applications and programs. So what kernel actually does is to work as an interface between these two. For example, manage when and for how long a process can access CPU. So now that you know where kernel fits in, let's look at this diagram too. The kernel works in its own space known as kernel space. On top of that is user space. Applications interact with kernel through SCI or system call interface. As you see in the diagram, there is also GNUC library that provides a mechanism to transition between user space applications and kernel. Code executed by system run on CPU in kernel mode or user mode. Unlike user mode, in kernel mode there is no restriction to accessing hardware. You should also know that kernel process crash can crash the entire system, but user process crash is limited and can be recovered. At last, let me show you how you can check the version of the Linux kernel. So just start your Linux machine. As you might know, there are many Linux distributions out there like Red Hat, Ubuntu, Fedora, and a lot more. But if you don't have Linux installed on your system, you can go and check out my previous videos. So first you need to open terminal. Just type terminal and open it. Let me clear this first, okay? You can use several commands to find out about kernel version. I usually use uname. Just write uname with R flag. It shows you the kernel version. So it's version 5.11 with 36 level of bug fixes, and by generic it means it's a desktop version, it's not a server version. If you use uname with a flag, just write uname -a, it shows you more details about the system. Let me expand it a little bit. And Linux is the name of the kernel and the host name. This is the version of the kernel with level of bug fixes. Generic, it means that it's a desktop version, it's not a server version. #40, it means how many times Ubuntu has compiled this version. And this is the version of the Ubuntu, and the last compile was at Saturday, September 18 at 2:14, and this is the machine architecture, processor architecture, and the operating system, and what is the name of the operating system. So this was it, an introduction to Linux and Linux kernel. If you have any question, let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.